So, dear brothers and sisters, often when it comes to how we imagine how Jesus is, we remember our years in primary school. And our years in primary school obviously show us who Jesus is in a very simple way. And it's obviously you have to teach according to the age group that you're teaching. So our understanding of Jesus is that he's nice and he's kind and he's helpful and he heals people and he preaches and he teaches, and it's all very kind of gentle and it's all very simple, it's all very straightforward. As I say, it's not wrong, but there are other aspects to Jesus as well. Like when he takes on the scribes and Pharisees, when he purifies the temple, when he's very blunt with people, when he needed to be for the good of their souls. And ultimately that in dying on the cross, he's doing battle with sin and death and evil and overcomes them by dying, by his passion, death, and resurrection. So often our adult understanding can kind of be lacking in like the gravity of who Jesus is. Like this is serious. Like the culmination of history, all the preparation of the Old Testament culminates then in Jesus coming, in Jesus preaching and teaching as he did, and then in Jesus' passion, death, and resurrection. It's what it all points to. It's what all the sacraments now draw their grace from. So this is hugely important. So if we just stay stuck in our primary school understanding of the faith, our faith ends up lacking the kind of the substance, content, a bit of meat to it, and it ends up just being this kind of nice shell of religiosity and maybe occasional religious observance, but it's got no heart to it. So when we try to understand who Jesus really is from an adult, like as adults, to understand who is this Jesus guy, and in a way, maybe if we want to ask a little more bluntly, why should I care? Like, does it really matter? At the end of the day, I mean, if I'm doing my thing, I'm taking care of our little cabbage patch out the back and tipping away now, just keeping the house in order and not doing any harm to anyone, isn't that enough? And what does Jesus have to do with any of this ordinary stuff of my life? See, Jesus has everything to do with it. Jesus has everything to do with it. Because all that we do, we can do out of love for him. And then we're united with his mission. Keep in mind, his mission included 30 years of hiddenness. 30 years of just being at home, tipping away, as we'd say, maybe helping St. Joseph with the bit of carpentry and bringing in timber and stripping off the bark and drying it out and planing it and making tables and chairs and who knows whatever else. 30 years of his life was that, just the ordinary stuff of every day. Only 3 years were preaching and teaching. So most of his life was very ordinary. It's just like ours. Just our lives are relatively ordinary. But in those kind of ordinary things, in those hidden things, we're practicing and learning virtue. How to forgive, how to heal from wounds, how to work with other people, how to balance my own will with the will of others, how to love. I'm learning all of that in the hiddenness of family life. So the reason I say this is it's important then to look at details. When we hear gospel stories, like who is the Jesus behind this, and what does it say? What do these gospels say to us about him? So today there's a man who has a speech impediment and is deaf, and very kindly, it says they brought to him. So someone, friends I suppose, brought this man to him. But the interesting thing I just wanted to focus on briefly today is that it says he took him aside in private, away from the crowd, and put his fingers into the man's ears and touched his tongue with spittle. He looks up to heaven and he prays, right? And he sighs. It's a very the verb they use is that he sighs. It's like he feels the man's pain, the man's frustration, the rejection, and also, as we've said before, because in Jewish understanding, any illness was due, they believed, was due to some sin that you had committed. So if you were deaf or if you were dumb or if you couldn't have children, God was punishing you for some grave sin that you had committed. So in the eyes of the world at the time, he was considered a grave sinner. So he can't speak and he's deaf. Oh, well, you must have done something pretty bad to merit that, to warrant that. So Jesus sighs. He sighs. And I think, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding would be he's sighing with empathy. just with empathy, just knowing this man's suffering. And he says those beautiful words, be opened, be opened. Okay, so what does this say? What I wanted to hone in on was that he takes this man aside, away from the crowd. Very often when it comes to the way we live our faith, much of it is in community, which is good and which is important, which is necessary and which is established by the church that way. There is nothing wrong with it, that we come together to celebrate sacraments. You know, we come together to celebrate Mass, come together to celebrate christenings and confirmations and confession, maybe a little less. Do that in your own. But for most of the sacraments, we come together as a community. Okay, so, which is good and which is important. And that definitely is often in our faith journey, it's about balance, you know. So there are things that we must do together in community, great. But then there are also aspects of our faith or our prayer life which we should do in private. So just he and I. Just the Lord and me. So this has been understood also by other world religions. You know, there are probably other world religions more famous than ours for their meditation. You know, Buddhism is very fashionable these days because of their understanding of meditation, going away into the silence, lighting some incense and, you know, creating a place of peace around you. And we don't seem to, our tradition of that isn't as well known, even though it dates right back to the beginning of Christianity, particularly in the 3rd century in Egypt, where this phenomenon began of people going into the desert there in Egypt and dedicating their lives as hermits and in lives of penance and fasting, dedicating their lives to the Lord. Then they became known for their sanctity, and people would actually come out into the desert to visit them, to speak to them, to get confession from them. Then monasteries, so they went out in the desert to become, you know, hermits and get away from everyone. They ended up building monasteries around them because there was such traffic coming out to them to visit them. So, point being though, the understanding of spending time alone with the Lord. Okay, so, my faith, me. How much time do I spend alone with the Lord? How much time do I spend alone with the Lord? And what are the consequences of this? So, the Lord takes him aside, away from the crowd. And in that situation, in that place, Jesus and this person, this man is healed. And I really believe the Lord wants to do so much of that in us too, you know. He wants to take us away from the crowd, take us away from the busyness and the eyes of others, and just take us away into the silence and be with us there and heal us there. And, you know, touch our eyes that they might be open, that we might see the truth. Touch our ears, that what we hear we can filter and we'll know and recognize the truth. And touch our tongues, that they can be loosened, that we can speak the good, the beautiful, and the true. I think the Lord wants to do this in us, in all of us, in those silent places within us. Now, our lives are what they are, especially in family life. I don't think you're going to get an uninterrupted hour at home without anybody asking for help for something. So the Lord understands that too, that we don't have the liberty of just dropping everything and going. But it's a question that I often ask our young people when they say, I have no time to pray. And I just ask them to take out their phone there a second, take out your phone there, take out your phone. Okay, just check your app there. It tells you, what was your screen time? What was your screen time yesterday? 4.5 hours. 4.5 hours. That's how much time you have to pray. That's how much time you have right there. It says it right there. 4.5 hours. That's how much time you have. If you have enough time to be on Facebook and TikTok and whatever else, that's not Facebook is now. Facebook's for the grandparents these days, by the way. So it's Instagram and Snapchat, right? If you have enough, and TikTok, if you have 4.5 hours to be on that, that's how much time you have to pray. For a lot of us with responsibilities, as I say, it's not as easy just to drop things and go. We can probably find more than we realize, but also even travel time, car time. It's a good prayer time. You know, we're away from everyone. Last thing at night, or if you're an early riser, those moments when there's nothing else going on, and in our heart of hearts, we can rest in Him. We can be with Him. We can be strengthened, healed, consoled by the Lord who loves us. And we don't need anything or anyone to guide us in that. It's just you and him. The Lord takes you aside, away from the crowd. He lays his hands on you. He knows what you've been through. He sighs with love and with empathy for what you've been through. And he wants to heal you. This is our God. He knows our hearts. So we ask the Lord today to renew our faith in him and to deepen the intimacy of our prayer lives with him, that we may find in him our strength, our healer, and our consoler. Amen.